This episode of the Police One podcast is sponsored by Officer Store. Learn more about getting the gear you need at prices you can afford by visiting officerstore.com. Hey, welcome back. You're listening to Policing Matters on policeone.com. I'm your host, Jim Dudley. Well, if you haven't heard, two teenage boys from Miami, Florida were arrested in December for allegedly creating and sharing AI-generated nude images of male and female classmates without consent, according to police reports obtained by Wired via public records request. The arrest reports say the boys aged 12 and 13 created the images of the students between the ages of 12 and 13. And the Florida case appears to be the first arrests and criminal charges as a result of alleged sharing of AI-generated nude images to come to light. The boys were charged with third-degree felonies, the same level of crimes as grand theft auto or false imprisonment under a state law passed in 2022, which makes it a felony to share, quote, any altered sexual depiction, end quote, of a person without their consent. Is this the next era of AI policing? Well, I've got a great guest for you today. Her name is Heather Mahalik Barnhart. She is the Senior Director of Community Engagement at Cellebrite. She has a robust background in digital forensics and e-discovery, with more than 20 years of experience with forensic acquisitions, examinations, advanced exploitation, manual decoding, application reverse engineering, SQL queries, scripting, professional training, and report writing on electronic media. Wow, that's a lot to take in. I'm going to have to get you to clarify some of those things. Hey, to help build an engaged, educated community of digital forensics incident response, or DFIR, take note, you're going to see that a lot. Heather also serves as the DFIR curriculum lead and faculty fellow instructor at the SANS Institute. Heather co-authored the bestseller Practical Mobile Forensics, first through fourth editions, and served as technical editor of Learning Android Forensics by Pact Publishing. Well, welcome to Policing Matters, Heather Mahalik Barnhart.
Thank you for having me. That was quite a mouthful.
Yeah, that's a tongue twister. So I appreciate you coming on board because, like a lot of things, technology, the emergence of technology sometimes leaves us lagging in catching up with policies and law. We've seen it with drones technology. We've seen it with GPS and other technologies where we're looking at the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, and so many others. And we've seen some popular news incidents, mostly involving celebrities, very famous celebrity, and their civil suits. Tell us about internet exploitation involving digital images of children. How is this connected to deep fakes?
Yeah, so I started my career, I've been in this 21 years. And at the start of my career, I was doing child exploitation cases, and clearly very different then. But honestly, some of the hurdles and setbacks that we found back then in 2002, 2003 are the same now. But the issue is it real or not with AI? That is one of the hardest things. And it's new. It's new for everyone, but it's changing every day too. So I used to joke that in forensics, old dogs have to learn new tricks. And this is the perfect example. Like, if you're not willing to learn, and if you're set in your ways and you think you know how to look for images and you know how to mitigate and assist in these investigations, you're going to be pretty stale in your career very, very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen so many different applications come out where you can ask in some of the chat apps, you can ask them to generate a photo, and sometimes they're images that the AI has taken off the net, sometimes images of real people. How's
Yes.
How's the changing tech landscape increasing the complexity of investigations for law enforcement now?
So I think the first issue is it real or is it not when you find it? If it's not, if it's AI generated, is it generated from or Frankenstein from someone that's real? So if you think about that, you could easily morph a picture of you and I together, and AI can do that. Is it simply enhanced? Is it completely generated from stealing? So if you think of like just profiling, think about, and this is not child exploitation in any nature, but even the AI deepfake at Zoom, where that CFO sent all that money and transferred it, they took the time to learn what those people look like, to learn their voices. So even beyond just a picture, this can be used for complete sextortion to then get a real child or teenager to actually converse with you. So on the attacker side, it's awful. On the examiner side, we have to learn first and foremost, is it real or not? And what to do. What if it's not? There's different legalities for law enforcement to even learn and judges to learn and us to face on what do we do if we say this is strictly AI and we know it and this is who generated it, then what? Like Florida just did that, but everyone else is kind of catching up. There's not known law where like, oh, if I do this thing, this is bad. And like you said, everything wants to generate it for you because these AI apps want you to stay within their app. They don't want you to need anything from other application.
Right. And you bring up a really good point about not just the images, but also voice. And, we've been dealing for a long time now with phishing, the PH kind of phishing. And, somebody getting a hold of your grandma's phone number and calling her and saying, hey, Heather's in prison in, pick a country, send, $2,000 in gift cards to this address. And I mean, now grandma's hearing your voice. So
Yeah.
what are we doing about that?
Yeah, it's awful. And so I've done some work and I've been working with one of my coworkers at Cellebrite on securing the generations. And I know a lot of people have seen my securing your kids and securing the family and how to have talks, but what about your parents? And that's something that I've been trying to do, a tip sheet. Because what you would do to protect your kids, if I tried to put those protections on my dad, he would lose his mind. If I said, Dad, your stuff's going to sync to mine, it would probably keep him safer, to be honest. But it's a difference and it's explaining to them because I can honestly tell you my dad would take anything seriously. If he thought it was me, and here's another issue. I used to prank my dad a lot. This was like a thing I did in my 20s. So he would maybe even think it's truly me pranking him, which is terrible. So being able to fake that generation versus our children versus teenagers versus coworkers, it's something that everyone needs to be aware of. And it's happening all the time. And think about the election stuff that's coming up. That's going to be a huge. And I have a friend and he's doing a presentation on it. He's like, I want to say a joke, but I don't want people to get mad at me. Like the president's not going to call you. You're not important enough. I'm like, you need to say that because people want to believe it.
Yeah, for sure. And, we talked before we started recording about, once the internet gets it, it's there, right? And so
Yeah.
I know you've got some links we're going to talk about later on that might help with removing some of this content. But otherwise, it's out there and now it can be manipulated. And, if you asked me 5 years ago about conspiracy theories, I'd tell you, whatever. But I tell you now, everything I'm looking at as far as from a news source on network news, newspaper, especially social media news, I really stop and pause to wonder if it's real.
Yeah.
And, it's a shame that we're in that situation today.
It's so true. And we're so targeted. The messaging and the news that my husband sees is so different than the news that I see. And it could be as simple as a political difference. It could be gender bias. There's so many things, but my news is completely different and the messages are completely spun.
Totally.
And honestly, you know what I was just thinking about? I think I mentioned this in an article somewhere in Forensic Magazine or something that I did, but anything that touches the internet, like you just said. And I was just lecturing the other day, like whatever I put on this device, I assume someone or something will see at some point, and then you're safe. But if you didn't create it and it's been created of you, or to be an AI generation of you, your family sees that, your significant other see it. And once you see it, the harm is kind of done. Like that is imprinted in their minds. So even if you think of like Taylor Swift, those images, like my daughter, who is 7 years old, heard about that someone did bad things to Taylor Swift on the internet. And she's like, Mama, what does her dad think? I'm like, I know, babe, it's terrible. Like she didn't truly understand the nature of it. They just thought that someone was trying to hurt Taylor Swift. And that's like a huge, huge issue in my household with my kids, but it's true. You can't unsee that stuff.
Yeah, you're right. The damage is done. So we hear about the civil suits, copyright infringements of images taken from other sources. Uh, how does digital forensics work? Is it a matter of just searching gigantic databases or open source photos? I'm wondering, and I'm going to bleed into my next question about how do we prevent it from happening? Are we just posting too much on social media? I know some
Yeah.
people that are just deathly afraid from posting anything because of the situation we're in now.
Yeah. So I will start with how we do this. And honestly, how we do this today is very similar to what I said when I learned as a 23-year-old how to start working child crime cases. There's AI machine learning is built into the software that we as examiners and analysts use. So I know I would use things for skin detection. And the issue is you don't want to have to go photo by photo because then it's also impacting you. And people don't think about the mental health of the workers of this type of it. It's tough and it really wears on you. So you don't want to do anything that's piece by piece, look at everything. So if you're leveraging a piece of software that's going to help you with skin detection, confidence levels, similar images, similar faces, if you know the person you're investigating, were they hotel room? Where did it take place? Were there any consistencies? And sadly, I would learn a lot of consistencies. We relied a lot on NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, their hash sets. So they have known hash sets of missing kids. Now, that worked for a while. I will tell you, even in the last decade, with social media, a lot of compression and things changed those images. But now with AI, those hash sets are only as good as the images that are known. So if they start learning AI images, that would be fantastic. Because then you just run essentially a hash checklist and it says you have a match. And those matches are solid gold for law enforcement because there's no doubt that it is that image. But the issue is when it's not. And you have to support it, you have to fight, you have to really push to prosecute it. And I remember an investigation, and I assume I'm allowed to talk about this because I'm not saying names or anything, but I was very young in my career and I was very scarred by these cases. And I remember the assistant U.S. attorney said there weren't enough known images to prosecute. And I kept pushing it and kept pushing it and pushing it. And they ended up interviewing the suspect, and he admitted that his wife was pregnant. He wouldn't trust himself around children. And I was like, thank God I pushed. But it's one of those things, if you don't have time to push, or if it's just on to the next thing, or you have someone that's like, absolutely not, you must have 9 images, not 7. And it was that close for me. It was like 2 off. So things like that always, I don't know, they just kind of stay with me. And because that I am, I think, a little bit more security conscious, but I still post pictures of my kids on social media. I do. And I will. And I think this is where people need to do better. And this would be our generation. Security settings. So you should not use an app that everyone can see all your stuff. You should not make your stories public. Everything I do, I don't even allow friends of friends. Because think about that. Like if you and I become friends right now, you don't know that my uncle isn't out to somehow use you as AI and steal your show and take your money. Like you have no idea. But the friends of friends are a huge threat. And people don't realize they let it go a level too deep. Something else I recommend is checking in Facebook and Instagram. You can look at people that do not interact with you other than watching. Like if they don't comment, if they don't like, if they just watch your stuff, and it recommends you remove them. So I recommend that as well. Often I will see people, I'm like, who is that person and how did they get here? And I immediately remove them. So check your privacy settings. Always set up multi-factor authentication. So you get a security code to get access to it. And this sounds ridiculous and vain, but Google yourself. Set Google alerts. So I have a Google alert for my name. I also have Google alerts for smartphone forensics because I want to see anything that's like latest and greatest in the news. But I think being aware really helps. But we can't fear it. We have to learn it and we have to live with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you talked about a hash earlier. Are we ever going to see something like a watermark for our photos that we post so that they can't be used?
Like almost copywriting them?
Mm-hmm.
That would actually be
But
very nice.
essentially throwing up a watermark so that somebody tries to take it and use it anywhere else, it'll come up blurry or unusable, pixelated.
That would be lovely. To be honest, I don't know. And something I'm researching right now, I say right now, I'm creating the data. I haven't looked at it yet, but at Techno Security, it's a conference that's coming up. Cellebrite is a huge sponsor of it. It's primarily law enforcement. It'll be held in June in Wilmington, North Carolina. I am doing a talk with my husband on AI or real. And what we want to do is try to find, is there a flag somewhere in these AI created images that law enforcement can be like, oh, I see a flag. This is recreated from this thing. And if it's recreated from something, can you tell? But the issue is we don't know. That whole project, that could be a whole flop. We could be like, oh, you can't tell, but then at least we'll educate people on what we tried to do and why. So I think either way, it will be a win for a talk, but it would be great if we could find a way to be like, this is real, this is not. But as far as watermarking and protecting, it would be great if social media prevented even a download, but then people could screenshot it. So it's a social media nightmare.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you've written, I've looked at your articles. You've written some great ones about, you've mentioned keeping your children's devices safe. I mean, I've seen toddlers who can't talk on iPads on airplanes and, restaurants and things. Are we talking about certain apps? Surely predators can roam certain apps and start building a chat, gain the confidence of your kids, sharing a conversation. What's your advice to parents?
So I have a tip sheet and I'm happy to share this as well. And it's talking about everything and it's ageable too. So the first thing you need to do is you need to have control of your kids' devices. Set up a parent and child account, but also think beyond these terrible things happening. Think about something that could happen to every kid today. They lose their device. You need to be able to find it. You want to be able to run Find My from your device to get theirs, to ping it, see where it is. Location tracking. I use my kids' devices a lot for location tracking as well as what they're doing, but screen time is an easy option. Now my son is entering middle school, so he's pushing a little bit harder for some more freedom than my 7-year-old, and I get it, although maturity-wise, to be determined, but you have to consider your kid and you have to talk about it. And I think the trust is there. So my son, his group at school has a Snapchat conversation. And I saw an inappropriate comment by one of his friends. And I said, you have two options here. You remove yourself from the group or you tell him your mom read it. And if he ever writes anything like that again, he's no longer your friend on social media. And he's like, Mom, it's embarrassing that people will know you read my stuff. I'm like, no, it's not. His parents should be reading that too. And it shouldn't be said. And I tried to educate him on something called a digital fingerprint that will follow you for life. And I was like, you say one thing it could be a joke to you, but it could really hurt someone else's feelings. It could ruin who you are as a person in the eyes of others. So I also restrict a lot of apps. And my son fights me harder on that. Like he wants TikTok. And I say, no, but then they find ways around it. They watch YouTube shorts. It's the same thing as TikTok. I'm like, because my son will send me a video. I was like, oh yeah, I've seen that on TikTok. So he finds ways around it. He'll brag to me on, you blocked YouTube, but I can get to it through Safari. I'm like, oh goodness, okay. So it's really tough. Now he's going to enter the phase of a cell phone. And I tried it. He's like, what's the difference of a cell phone or my iPad? And I keep having this conversation with him on here. He's protected. He is at his dad's house or he's here on his iPad. When he's on his phone, he's on a school bus, he's in a sports locker room. And there's like, Jack, it takes one post to be misinterpreted. So it's scary. It's very scary.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you've touched on a couple of things that I want to get back to, talking about supporting law enforcement investigations. But first, I'd like to take a moment and thank our sponsor, Officer Store, equipping protectors with passion. That's how we operate, and it's how we live. We understand that having the right gear can mean the difference between life and death. Our goal is to get you the gear you need, when you need it, at prices you can afford. Visit us at officerstore.com. And we're back, and I'm speaking with Heather Mahalik Barnhart. She is the Senior Director of Community Engagement at Cellebrite. And Heather, you and Cellebrite have been in collaboration to stop human trafficking with the NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Great organization, and I just want to throw it out there for any cops listening. Free training, free education. They will pay for you to go out to Arlington, Virginia. If it's not online, you can go to Arlington, Virginia, go through their courses as a law enforcement, mid-level manager and above. I think even school resource officers. What's your involvement with the NCMEC?
So I've worked with them now 20 years, but now with Cellebrite with OFTA, I have direct involvement with them, and I've done a few things. Cellebrite as a whole, we have been supporting law enforcement in child crimes and investigations for decades. This support could be as simple as we have something called the Dream Team at Cellebrite. It's me and a bunch of other people who are past examiners, cops, researchers that just help answer tough questions. What does this artifact mean? How do I know if I can trust it? So something as simple as that to the entire launch of OFTA, which is Operation Find Them All. And my previous CMO, she made a comment about, is it realistic to think we can find them all? And the name of Operation Find Them All. And we don't know if we don't try. So that always really sits with me. But the things that we do with Team Adam, John Walsh's son, so it's called Team Adam, and it comes through to Cellebrite. And what we do is first we make sure that we support it with essentially as urgent as needed. So we provide our Cellebrite offered services as urgently as needed to support law enforcement in these investigations. And it's everything from investigation to what happens when victims are recovered. Because when victims are freed, they obviously need a lot of support. And I know on LinkedIn, I've posted things about OFTA, and it was awesome to see the deeper community saying, how can we help? What can we do? And I know you can go to NECMEC and you can volunteer to put together survivor bags. So something as simple as that to doing more talks, but Cellebrite is really all in on OFTA.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, you mentioned Adam Walsh, and of course there's Jacob Wetterling and Megan Kanka and all the victims that we should be talking about more, so you remember their names over the offenders. How does law enforcement and advocacy groups work together to accelerate these ICAC investigations? I know there are civilian groups out there working on their own. They're sort of tipsters, but they go deep into these investigations and then turn them over to law enforcement. How are you working with them?
Yeah, so I had the honor of meeting Matt Parker. He is the founder of Exodus Road, and it's to essentially stop human trafficking. I met him. I went to Florida and spoke on behalf of Representative Franklin on just speaking in schools, educating children not to take the first image and send it to someone, and then what to do if that happens, like how to not get trafficked, essentially, like from an Android and iOS perspective. But Matt, they aid. So Exodus Road will pair or team with any law enforcement agency globally. So anywhere around the world, they'll go into China and help if needed. And they will research with the investigators, show them how to use solutions like Cellebrite Pathfinder or something like that, they will help with the takedown, like the actual go in, get it, stop it, and then also freeing the victims and protecting the victims. So it's really impressive what Matt and that team does. And then there's another group, I was just introduced to them, NCPTF, National Child Protection Task Force. And they are previous group of law enforcement, primarily based out of the United States. And their whole goal is to essentially do what Matt is doing, everything from OSINT, like if you think something is going on, OSINT investigations, watching network traffic, assisting with takedowns. It's amazing. And the thing that they were lacking was phone forensic support, which is why they were introduced to me. And I was like, yes, we want to do this. This is a part of OFTA. We all need to work together. And they're completely nonprofit as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'll have to get a list from you to post in our show notes along with your other links. Smaller agencies, rural agencies don't have the the budget to deal with some of the things that you're talking about. It's great to have those resources for those agencies, that are not major cities with big budgets.
Yeah, and I think the hard part is educating people that these resources exist. And I feel like they often stumble upon it when it's too late for them. They're like, I really could have used this in this investigation. So it's tough. It's a tough pill to swallow, knowing that you have such amazing things to offer people, but no one knows how to find it.
Yeah, for sure. So, hey, I appreciate the time you're spending with us today. Again, I'm going to put those links in. What else are you working on these days?
Oh my gosh. So I actually have a lot of AI generation and child exploitation, sextortion talks coming up. I'm speaking a keynote at RSA. And what's nice about RSA is there could be up to 30,000 people who watch that keynote. So I feel like that's a great way to talk about the take it down. So if you could do everything perfectly and then a picture could hit and you could stumble upon it and say, that's not me. I think it's AI generated of me, or it is me, and I made a mistake and I want it to be taken down. So how to use NECMEC to do things like that, like actually have it physically removed from the internet so no one ever sees it again. Sextortion, how it starts, how to prevent. And I feel like everyone could watch that because it could happen. It could happen in the workplace. It doesn't have to just be a child. It could happen to anyone. It's a terrible form of blackmail, and it's very easy to get lured into. I'm doing the AI or real talk that I mentioned at Techno Security. I'm running Cellebrite C2C inaugural summit in August in DC, and we have a ton of investigative talks. A lot of it, NCPTF, they're going to be featured there. Matt Parker should be there. A lot of stuff about OFTA. I think John Walsh may potentially do a talk. So there's a lot on child crimes, AI, and just hopefully people come together to be educated. We're doing digital justice awards. So we're trying to recognize people who solved these hard cases, tried their best, did more than the average person.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, all great stuff. When I was the captain of our juvenile division in San Francisco, I didn't realize the amount of work and the vicarious trauma that our investigators are seeing. I hope your conferences include something like that as well, wellness for ICAC investigators.
Absolutely.
Well, Heather, you're doing great work out there. Again, we're going to publish your links, and we're going to be looking for more from you and your appearances. Heather Mahalik Barnhart is the Senior Director of Community Engagement at Cellebrite, doing really good work, helping out in a really good fight. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right. And to our listeners, thanks for listening. And let me know what's happening in your neck of the world. And what are you doing for internet crimes against the children? How well do you think you're prepared in this next fight against AI generated images, blackmail? Heather talked a little bit about sextortion. I mean, we've seen some horrific results, teens committing suicide because they just, they're so inundated with the trauma that the images will ripple to their surrounding social groups, their parents, and in general. So we got to put an end to it. Thanks for listening in. I hope to talk to you again real soon. Take good care.